Once upon a time, I know somebody that knew the sky, that knew a different guy, that knew the sky, that knew the sky, that knew the sky guy, that knew the sky. That knew the sky, that knew the sky, that knew the snowman, and who knew Frosty, and who knew a dinosaur, who knew a guy, who knew a guy, who ate a guy, who knew this guy, who knew this guy, who knew the sky, who knew this guy. This is getting boring, who knew the sky, and then he knew this guy. Then he knew this guy. Then he knew this guy. Then he knew this different guy. He knew this weird guy. And he knew Barney. Then he knew a guy that knew a different dinosaur. That's Barney's friend. That knew this guy. That knew this guy. That knew this different guy. That knew this guy. That knew this guy. And that knew this guy that had 4 eyeballs. And who knew this guy that had 10 eyeballs. Who knew this guy with 5,000 eyeballs. Who knew this guy with 5,000 mouths? Who knew this guy that was a baseball player? Who knew this guy that was watching TV and he saw a baseball player? That knew me. That I know somebody named Bob, and he knew this guy that knew this other guy that died, but before he knew this guy, and then he knew this guy, and then he knew this girl, he knew this guy, he knew this guy, who knew this somebody that knew this guy that wanted to be this guy, that knew this guy, and the guy that wanted to be the guy, he wanted to be Michael Phelps. That knew this, okay, let me get on. Who knew this guy, who knew this guy, who knew this guy, who knew this guy that worked at Chick-fil-A, who knew this guy, who knew this guy, who knew this guy, who knew this thingy bob, who knew this guy, who knew this dinosaur named Bob the Builder, that knew Shaggy, that knew, then he knew the rest of the gang. Oh, he knew the rest of the gang. And then the gang knew.
Can you just tell the end of the story?
Okay. And then